passing stranger, you do not know how longingly I look upon you. You must be he I was seeking, or she I was seeking. It comes to me as of a dream. I have somewhere surely lived a life of joy with you. All is recalled as we flit by each other, fluid, affectionate, chaste, matured. You grew up with me, were a boy with me, or a girl with me. I ate with you and slept with you. Your body has become not yours only, nor left my body mine only. You give me the pleasure of your eyes, face, flesh, as we pass. You take of my beard, breast, hands in return. I am not to speak to you. I am to think of you when I sit alone or wake at night alone. I am to wait. I do not doubt I am to meet you again. I am to see to it that I do not lose you. That was To a Stranger by Walt Whitman. I'm not Walt Whitman, as you may have noticed. I'm Tiff Regan, and you're listening to Tiff Loves Words. Today we're going to unpack that fleeting, beautiful, linguistically delicious little snack and talk about my all-time favorite poet, Walt Whitman. So let's set the stage a little. The 19th century, a time of great social change and revolutionary spirit. So in the 19th century, a lot of stuff was going on. We're talking empires collapsing, a second industrial revolution, gearing up for the Civil War, abolishing slavery, getting rid of the English church. States were experimenting, filling each other out. Do we want our own constitutions? Do we not want our own constitutions? We're shaking off that English influence, and America is taking its sweet first little baby steps into democracy. Can you imagine it? This was a time of great possibility. This is the world that Walt was born into. So Walt Whitman was born in 1819 on Long Island. He had a total of 8 siblings. His father was a drunk, and his mother was probably just really tired. His parents were Quakers, and they named several of their kids after well-known American leaders. We're talking Andrew Jackson, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. This was a family of big ideals. But at the same time, this was a family facing extreme economic hardship. Walt describes his childhood as restless and unhappy. Think about having a ton of kids in 1800s Brooklyn. There was no money. As the second of 9 children, Walt felt like it was his responsibility to do something about it. So, around the age of 11, Walt stops school and gets a job. And he starts working in newspapers. So here he is, extremely young, extremely impressionable, around people who not only write, but are well known for writing. So naturally, he starts writing. Around age 16, he submits some poems to a newspaper anonymously, but for the most part, his early life had a lot of failure. He tries a few things. He tries his hand at teaching, at owning his own newspaper, and these endeavors don't really work out. In his early 20s, he starts writing some editorials. That graduates into some fiction pieces. He also sprinkles in some poetry published in newspapers and other publications. That's when Walt starts getting a little more well-known for his writing. He starts publishing a serialized novel in a well-known newspaper. Then, in his late 30s, something big happens. He self-publishes the very first edition of what will later be known as his greatest masterpiece, a collection of poetry called Leaves of Grass. This first self-published edition was paid for entirely by Walt himself. It was put together at a local print shop in the off hours, in true DIY original punk fashion. About 800 copies were made, and reception wasn't great. Actually, it was practically non-existent. And then, in a small twist of fate, a young poet by the name of Ralph Waldo Emerson got a hold of a copy. And guess what? He loved it. In fact, he loved it so much, he wrote a letter to Walt, and they became friends. Emerson started singing Walt's praises, and that's when some shit started to go down. Spoiler alert, if you haven't read any of his other works, Walt's poetry can be sexual at times. Let's just say he's big on loving himself and loving others. As you might have guessed, not everybody was into it at that time. Some people called it trashy and profane. They said, hey, you're getting real weird with it, and we don't like it. But Walt was like, all right, whatever. In fact, Walt revised and released it again. And here's the thing. Like Emerson, there were some people who adored it, like famous writers Henry David Thoreau and Amos Bronson Alcott. Through the publication, revision, and re-release of Leaves of Grass, Walt started connecting with people who thought like him. Enter the movement of transcendentalism. So, poets during this time, like Emerson, Thoreau, and Ellen Sturgis Hooper, are now known as the Transcendental Club. These are people who explore themes like spirituality and the connection between soul and the earth. As you can imagine, during a time of great social change, these people were pushing boundaries, especially Walt Whitman, who was talking about the body and sex and indulging and celebrating and satisfying. He was all about self-love and self-exploration. Who wouldn't be into that? Later in life, Walt is deeply affected by the Civil War. He starts volunteering in hospitals, helping the wounded. He sees firsthand the chaos and destruction of war, but he also sees the side of war that's fragility, tenderness, humor, and grace. Not only does he keep these soldiers company, but he embraces them, holds their hands, connects with them. That theme of authentic connection is something that drives him for the rest of his life. You know, people often speculate about Walt Whitman's sexuality. They'd say he's gay, he's not gay, he's bisexual, he's a product of the times. I think from reading Walt Whitman and loving Walt Whitman that he would reject those labels and he would say that he just is. You know, one of my favorite quotes by Walt Whitman is the following. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. Whitman wasn't someone who lived by distinct lines. Things were blurred for him. Body, soul, nature, God. These were concepts to explore and to argue and to discuss. Nothing was set in stone. There were no hard boundaries. I kind of reject this idea that he had a hard line or hard labels. So that brings us back to the poem in question, To a Stranger. So here Walt Whitman is kind of narrating this moment, this fleeting moment you have with a stranger in public. And at the time, you know, we're still trying to shake off those polite societal rules that mean you can't reach out and make that genuine, vulnerable connection to another person. It's not allowed. So Whitman's kind of raging against that in this poem. You know, I think here Walt is really saying, I exist. Look at me. Look at my eyes and see me. You and I are here in this moment existing together. Our bodies are the same. Our souls are the same. We're made up of the same crazy stardust, both of us. We were the same a lifetime ago, and we will be the same a lifetime from now. You know, I feel like that is so relevant today in today's climate of connection through social media and putting on this mask of who we are and who we're not. Walt Whitman's words still ring very true about shedding all of those layers and just at the very core of who we are, making that connection. That's why I think that To a Stranger still holds up today and will hold up in 100 years and maybe then 100 more. People are still going to recognize that need and want for connection and to be able to be completely authentic just in that moment of existence with another human being. That's why I love Walt Whitman. And that's why I love these words. Thank you for listening. Tiff Loves Words is performed and recorded by Tiff Regan. Visit tiffloveswords.com or subscribe wherever it is you're downloading this podcast from. Okay, bye.